to the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. I'm Alfredo Brown, joined as always by Dave Kluge, and today we are taking a look at the top rookie wide receivers in the 2025 NFL Draft. We're going to take these guys, use our rankings, make a tier list for all of these players, and we're not only just going to rank them and talk about them, but we're going to give you the scouting reports from the Football Guys Rookie Guide. And this is just a limited number because you guys got to go and download the Rookie Guide over at footballguys.com/rookie guide, where we've got version 1 out. We've got all of our rankings, our reports, cool badges, everything, the consensus ranks. And then we're going to have version 2 that comes out after the NFL Combine. And Dave, I got to say, this is going to be a beefy show. We got a lot of wide receivers to talk about.
Yeah, very beefy show. We got a lot of beef in this show. And how many wide receivers are we talking about today, Alfredo?
We are going to talk about 16 wide receivers, but there's going to be 20 wide receivers in the tiers.
And do you know how many receivers we have in version 1 of our rookie guide?
Wait. I do know.
47. 47. Yeah. So I mean, we're just giving you a little taste here. I mean, we got a lot more in the rookie guide, so definitely want to check that out. Adding more after the combine. We'll probably add more after the draft as well. Not everybody in this guide is getting drafted, but we went deep here. So this is probably the best thing out there that you can use to kind of familiarize yourself with this incoming class before the combine next week.
Oh, yeah. And we're not going to waste any time. Let's do this, Dave. Let's hop right into the number 1 receiver that we've got here. And number 1 on the Football Guys Rookie Guide. He's not my number 1, but Tetairoa McMillan out of Arizona. I think he's an easy top 15 pick in this NFL draft. He's one of these guys that you and I have talked about has a really good floor. He's a fluid player, great hands. He can work deep and intermediate. Not an awesome change of direction guy, but there's so much of what he does that reminds me of his player comp here in the Rookie Guide, Drake London. He's a big player. He can catch everything, doesn't really have the top end speed, but he's got a surprisingly good release package to get off the line of scrimmage and get away from defensive backs, good footwork, good at finding space. That's one of my biggest factors when grading out a wide receiver is, can he find space? And Tet does that really well.
Yeah, and I think people are going to knock him because of the lack of long speed, but that's just not who he is. I mean, he's a possession guy. He's going to be working, 10 to 15 yards off the line of scrimmage, and his best skills, of course, the physical attributes, 6'5", 200 plus, he's got the fluidity and all that. But I think the best thing he does are the ball skills. When the ball is up in the air, he goes there and attacks it. He's great at high pointing the ball. He's good at working through contact to get back to the ball. He's got really good hands. I think that's the thing that gets lost here. People see the size and they see some of the big plays, and that's what they get excited about. But for me, it's just that he is a technically polished receiver. When the ball is coming near him, it's his, and he's going to go up there and get it. And I think that's what's really fun, and that's going to help him just continue to develop in the NFL and be that guy that's going to be a primary receiver.
I know I said a top 15 draft pick, but I think it's probably safe to call him top 10. Just looking at the draft order here, I think we end up seeing him go either number 8 to Carolina, which would be awesome. That would set him up for great success down the line, and then or number 9 to the Saints. And that one I don't know I like as much. That I don't know I like as much because he'll have to be a number 2 to Olave. And you still got the Derek Carr thing, but I guess if there's anyone that can do it now, it's Kellen Moore, who's been able to work with multiple wide receivers. So,
and you actually look at that receiver room, the way it could work out. Tet McMillan, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed. That is one hell of a trio. That could be a lot of fun.
Yep. The problem with that trio is it'll be attached to Derek Carr. So, sorry.
How long? What week do we see them come out at halftime and Kellen Moore is just wearing Derek Carr's helmet and just says, "I'm going to take it from here"?
Did you see the thing about the two of them playing against each other back in college and Kellen Moore absolutely
52-6 or something?
Freshman, Derek Carr, not great, not great. Imagine what it's like to do those quarterback meetings and have your coach in there. You're like, hey, remember when I whooped you up?
Yeah,
yeah. It's like dad beating you in sports all those years, and then you go and work for dad. It's awful. It's awful. All right, let's get to our second wide receiver here, and Luther Burden out of Missouri. He's my wide receiver 3, Dave. He's your wide receiver 2. He's a special athlete, man. He's so dynamic. I think he could be, or I don't think he could be. I think he's the most dynamic wide receiver in this draft class. And let's just say pure wide receiver for the sake of Travis Hunter, because we'll talk about that. But Luther Burden, just phenomenal breakout year as a true sophomore, 1,200 plus yards, 9 touchdowns. And then it's so annoying because Missouri, they really nerfed him. They really nerfed
Yeah.
him in the way that they ran their offense. The play from Brady Cook regressed so much in 2024. I was looking at it earlier today, David. Only one game over 270 passing yards, one or fewer touchdown passes in 75% of his games this past year.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
the offense is just 75% of Burden's career catches were inside of 10 yards. It's just it's crazy, but he is a special athlete. I look at him and I see a guy that, I mean, this is the kind of stuff we were talking about with Malik Neighbors last year. That it's just, it doesn't matter.
Jamar Chase.
Just get him on the field.
Mhm.
These are the type of players you just want to get the ball in their hand. It doesn't matter how. And I think there's a lot of people that are going to see him as a gadget guy, and that's could not be further from the truth. He gets open downfield. He can win on routes. I see a very good player, and I don't see the gigantic gap between Luther Burden and Tet McMillan. These guys to me are 1A, 1B if we're removing Travis Hunter from the conversation.
Yeah, and when I start my process, I always start by looking at the numbers, and I'd seen the name Luther Burden. Everybody was really excited about him. And I look and I'm like, this guy's like 20th percentile in yards per route run, 25th percentile in yak per reception, and those are two of the numbers that I like to look at. And I was like, I don't know, man, like, not too crazy about this. Like you said, he was just nerfed by Mizzou because as soon as you put on the tape, it's like, oh, that's why everybody loves him. Like the guy's awesome. And I think my take with Ted McMillan and Luther Burden, who are kind of the consensus wide receiver one, wide receiver two. I'm going to pair it the same take that I did last year about the quarterbacks. And in this situation, I think Ted McMillan is kind of your Caleb Williams and Luther Burden is kind of your Jaden Daniels, where I said, last year, Caleb Williams is the guy you should draft first because he's got the safer range of outcomes. But I wouldn't really scoff at anybody who wanted to go Daniels over Williams. And in the same way, I wouldn't scoff at anybody who wants to go Burden over McMillan, because if both of these players hit their ceiling outcomes, Burden's ceiling is so much higher. I mean, this is, like you said, Malik Neighbors. I said Jamar Chase. He's that level of an athlete that can just take over a game, can score anytime he touches the ball. So there is some refinement that he'll need to work on a little bit when he gets to the NFL. But the ceiling for Luther Burden isn't just, being a very good wide receiver. His ceiling is being one of, if not the best wide receivers in football.
Yeah, one of the guys that I comped into, which was borrowed here in the Football Guys rookie guide, is DJ Moore. And because I see it, he's a player that can win deep. He's a player that can win underneath and get you the yards after catch you need. You can be as creative as you want with him. He can play the Z, he can play the slot, he can go into the backfield. You can put him anywhere on the field. And I think Luther Burden will have success. It's going to be a matter of where he ends up in the draft. And Dave, I often see him, and I'm going through a mock draft right now, I often see him end up in places like 17 to the Bengals, or I see him at 22 to the Chargers. I see him at 25 to the Texans, 26 to the Rams. I mean, some of those sound
great. You don't
great.
see him at 11 to San Francisco?
It could work. It could work. Yeah. Absolutely. If Deebo Samuel's not there, I think that's the perfect Deebo Samuel replacement. Exactly. I also think that's why you draft a guy like Ricky Pearsall and you pay Brandon Ayuk and you pay Juwan Jennings, but that's besides the point. Teams do this stuff all the time. But yeah, I think Luther Burden is a surefire first-round player. To me, he's a guy that I would see as a top 15 type player. I don't know that there are going to be enough teams that need wide receiver that are going to take him that early. And there's going to be those concerns of what happened that final year at Missouri.
I think I don't think there's anything wrong with the predictions you have, but I'd be shocked to see him fall outside of the top 15. I think that he's going within there just because the ceiling is so high and wide receiver is a premium position that I think we probably don't see him make it past 15.
Well, let's do this little exercise here. I think that if Tet McMillan goes 8 to the Panthers, I think Luther Burden is absolutely in play for the Saints at 9.
Yep.
I don't know that he's necessarily in play for the Bears at 10.
I don't think they would. Yeah, I think they need to beef up the trenches, and they're pretty set at wide receiver with the Dunze and Moore. And I think there's, like you said, the comp, DJ Moore. I mean, there's a overlapping skill sets there if they go.
We have DJ Moore at home. Yeah.
I
mean, maybe the Cowboys at 12, because that would be a fun one. I could see that. Definitely
Miami
not
as
Miami.
Well. Really?
No.
You don't think so?
I mean, it could,
Tyreek
but
Hill's already got 1 foot towards retirement. I'm just saying. I mean, he'd be a nice replacement.
Oh man, you know what? You just got me all hot and bothered. I'm kind of into that. I'm kind of into it. All right. Thanks for that, Dave. Let's move on. Let's move on to our next guy on the list here. And our wide receiver 3, based on our consensus rankings here, Emeka Egbuka. We go into the next tier. This is tier number 2. I've got him on wide receiver 4. Dave, you have him as the wide receiver 3. And Emeka Egbuka had an awesome sophomore breakout, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. That was back when C.J. Stroud was there on the field. Primary slot guy throughout this final year of his career and then throughout most of his career. 81% of his snaps this last year from the slot. Good size, sturdy build. The Football Guys rookie guide comps him to Hines Ward, which I think was just a very interesting because you never hear that. You don't hear a lot of the old guys anymore. But
Shout out
Emeka
Jeff Bell,
Egbuka,
man. He
yeah,
he doesn't mess around with these player comps.
it's a fun because he's so strong. He's a good blocker, a good ball tracker, ball skills. Like he catches
I saw
everything.
an early Doucette comp in this guide just to give you an idea
Yeah,
of how Jeff Bell's brain works.
yes. I had some fun old ones in there. I can't remember them, but I remember writing it. Oh, it was Trey Stewart, and I comped him to Steve Slayton. And it's like when you type something, you're like, yeah, I nailed that. People are gonna love it.
Fingers are smoking. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But Emeka Egbuka, I see a little bit of Keenan Allen in here. Maybe not the same size, but it's a guy who's just a good route runner, slot player, strong, catch everything through contact. The speed and the change of direction are going to be the only question here for a guy like Egbuka. And he's another one of those. I think he kind of fits perfect with the Texans in the mid to late round of the first, but I think he's another guy that is a first round pick. I think what I like most about him, what made me put him as my wide receiver 4 over some other guys, is I think that his skill set is just going to lend to more targets in fantasy football.
Yeah, and I like Igbuka a lot. I've got him as my wide receiver 3 in this class. He's another player that when you look at the numbers, it's like, I don't really see it. And then you watch him on film and you're like, yeah, it makes sense. Very similar to Luther Burden. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they just had such a good running game there in Ohio State. They had other good wide receivers. He didn't need to be the focal point, but I think NFL teams are going to love him because he's just an aggressive and willing blocker on top of what he does as a receiver. And that goes a long way in the NFL. When I was watching Igbuka, I don't know how you'll feel about this comp. I said he looks like Amon St. Brown on steroids. I mean, he does all of the things that Amon does,
Well, we
gets
don't
in
do the
there.
steroids. It's not allowed.
Sorry, Amon St. Brown on
Whey
creatine.
protein.
Yeah,
Creatine. There we go.
creatine and whey. Yeah, but I mean, that's just he is a stronger, thicker version of Amon St. Brown. He can do all the same things. Now, for a player like this to succeed, it could be a little bit scheme dependent. He's not a guy who's going to work out on any of the 32 NFL rosters out there. But if there's a team that drafts him, you've got to imagine that he's probably going to go in the first round. And whatever team drafts him is going to have lofty expectations for him and probably a primary need out of the slot. And if they're able to do that, he's a guy who could walk in his rookie season and immediately command 130, 140 targets, being that target hog type of player. So I think the ceiling for Igbuka is so high. Big, big fan of the talent.
I didn't even think of this. 21 to the Steelers makes so
Ooh,
much sense.
yeah. He'll have
His
3
skill
great
set.
years, and then the Panthers will trade for him, and he'll
And just
retire.
absolutely lose it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to next one on here. Same tier, wide receiver 4. We're finally talking about him. This is the interesting one. It's Travis Hunter out of Colorado. And we needed to talk about this the way that we have it ranked. I have him as my wide receiver 1 because I think purely based on wide receiver skill set, he is the best wide receiver in this class. Now, Dave, you have him as wide receiver 7. Now, from what I understand, that has a lot less to do with skill set and way more to do with the actual position that he will play in the NFL. And all the things have been said about the scouting report. He's an awesome athlete, great route runner, ball skills, all those things. We don't have to talk about that. I think what everyone wants to know is what position is he actually going to play? And I think he's a top 4 pick in the NFL, no matter what, whether it's wide receiver or corner. For the NFL Combine, he's listed as a corner. It's been talked about by Lance Zierlein that 3 teams have him as a corner that can play some snaps at wide receiver. Daniel Jeremiah says he prefers him as a wide receiver. I think he should play wide receiver. I think he's better at that position, bigger impact to the game. The money's going to be better there. I'm just saying, Travis.
I will say it's not all that different. I was looking at the franchise tags. I mean, yeah, it's 21 million versus 20 million this year for the franchise tag.
Franchise tag. So like right. The number 1 corner gets paid like the number 13 wide receiver.
Right.
On an annual basis.
Right. But when you take the conglomerate of the top 5, it's not all that different. So I think that
don't use big words because I'm going to take offense to it. Okay.
Even if a team drafts him, if they get to choose, though, I mean, they might want to draft him as a quarterback just because it'll save him a little bit of money down the road. But I was actually kind of shocked to see the franchise tag for corners and wide receivers, how close they were. If you're one of the best at your position, you're getting paid. They're both premium positions, cornerbacks and wide receivers. And I think that's what makes this so intriguing because I think his ball skills are one of his best traits along with his athleticism. And you don't see any cornerbacks with the type of ball skills that Travis Hunter does. I mean, this is a guy who could just be a turnover machine at the NFL. So I don't know if we're going to get a clear picture. I think a lot of people are like, oh, we just got to wait to see where he's drafted and then we'll know. I don't know if we'll get a clear picture then. I don't know if we'll get a clear picture in week one. Through the first
No,
half of the season, it could be smoke and mirrors where we're kind of watching this slide back and forth on the usage. I don't think we're going to get a clear picture of who Travis Hunter is going to be in the NFL until after his rookie season. I think that they're going to give him opportunities at both positions, and wherever he makes the biggest impact is where we're going to see him play more. That's why I'm a little bit lower on him, because there is the chance that he is such a good cornerback that that's just where they prefer to take him here. And, if you're ranking him as a wide receiver one, or wide receiver two, wide receiver three, you're taking him in the first half of your rookie draft, first half of the first round of your rookie draft. And that's what concerns me a little bit, is I think the floor there is a little bit shakier than people are willing to admit.
and that's the thing. It's he would need to announce that he's going into the draft as a wide receiver and then be selected as a wide receiver for me to feel better about him. And then even then, there's some skepticism because let's say he goes number 1 overall to the Titans as a wide receiver. Who's throwing him the ball? Now,
No,
granted, that's the same conversation we had with Malik Neighbors, and it just works out for good players.
right.
It is what it is. But
But I
number
think
2
that's
to
the
the
intriguing one.
Browns.
What if he goes three to the Giants? They probably want him more as a corner than they do as a
Yeah.
receiver. And because
Yes.
that could really cap his upside with Neighbors there. So I think landing spot is going to be very important. And we might get a clear picture. Like you said, if the Titans draft him number 1 overall, I think we're probably going to see him play mostly receiver. But if he does fall to three to the Giants, they might have plans to use him more as a corner.
It seems highly unlikely, but I do want to say that if he goes 4 to the Patriots with Drake May as a wide
Mhm.
receiver,
Best outcome.
I will be
Best
so
realistic
happy.
outcome.
Yes, best realistic fantasy outcome for him. All right, let's go to our last player here in this tier, in tier number 2, and it's Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas. And Dave, we both have him as the wide receiver 5 in this class. And eh, Golden's such an interesting prospect to me because there was a whole lot of not much throughout his career. And then we get these big flashes in the
Mhm.
big games, great finish to the season, massive games against Georgia, Arizona State. And it makes you go back and start to watch the tape. And there's so many of these guys who maybe they don't produce throughout their career. So you don't sit there and go, well, this is a surefire first round guy. And then they go in the 5th round and you go, how did we miss this player? And this is what I think made a lot of people go back and look at the tape is you get these big games. What
Mhm.
does he do well? The body control is nuts. He's really good on these contested catches for being just a small guy, not small, but by NFL standards, he's at that 5'11", 6-foot range. And 70% on contested catches. The pacing in his routes is just awesome. I love his footwork, the way he's able to start, stop, change direction, all that. He's fast and sudden, but he's very poised when he's running these routes. It's not frantic like you see some of the really fast guys get. And so I just wish that we would have seen him do more on the field and do it more consistently. I think he'll probably end up being a round 1 guy, late round 1. I think I see him more as an early round 2 guy. How do you feel about Golden here, Dave?
Well, last year, if you remember, we saw that huge run of wide receivers from the end of round one
Yep.
carrying over into the top of round two. And I think we see that again. And I think that's where Golden and a few of the next guys that we're going to discuss are going to pop up as well. Now, you talk about, he hadn't really done much in his NFL career or in his college career so far. You look back last year, I mean, he was playing with Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell. There were other guys there that it was really hard to kind of climb that ladder. And it seemed like this year he just stepped into the role that was vacated by Adonai Mitchell, where he was mostly doing the downfield burner sort of stuff. I agree with most of what you said. I think the one thing I saw that you said he was good at contested catches. I did see him struggling a bit at times with contested catches. Now he's so athletic that he didn't have to rely on contested catches a lot because he was typically separating and just getting wide open. So I think that is one of the things that's a bit of a red flag for me is he relies on separation a little bit more than his ball skills, which worries me at the NFL because it's a little bit harder to separate against NFL cornerbacks. But like you said, I mean, he is so fast, he's so athletic, he's sudden, he's intentional, all of those fun words that you want to see in an athlete like this. I mean, he has very refined and polished athleticism. It's so easy to see the upside for a guy like Matthew Golden that I agree, he's probably going in round one just because some team is going to see that athleticism and just get completely enamored by it.
See, something you said there too is the perfect example of how even GMs will see a player and they value different things. So, like
Hmm.
for example, you said that you wanted to see a player that has the ball skills to win on those, and like I'm very different. I'm happy that you have your ball skills, but if you can't get open, you're probably not going to get the ball thrown to you. So, like I value it in a different way. he's not going to win every single contested catch. Like, this is not a guy that you're just like, all right, go for the fade. I'm going to toss it up. You'll climb the ladder, Matthew Golden. It was just that he was such a good contortionist, especially on the sideline. A lot of those same things that we saw from George Pickens years ago coming out of college. Golden's just got to do it more consistently. And I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. That's why I don't see him as a first round guy, but I think he probably gets there if he times really well at the combine.
I think the comp, I don't know who came up with this in our guide, but I think the comp with Brandon Cooks is perfect. I mean, that's exactly
Hey,
the
you know
type
who
of
did
guy that
that?
he is. That was you?
This guy. Yeah.
There you go. I like that comp a lot. That was a good one, Alfredo.
Thanks. You know, I do my best. I work hard. All right, let's go to the next tier here. Tier number 3. At 6, we've got Jalen Royals out of Utah State.
That's going to surprise some people, I think.
It shouldn't. It really shouldn't, Dave.
He's good. He's good. That's
yeah,
the early
man.
Doucette comp, by the way. That's the...
Yeah, that one. I love our rookie guide, and I love all the people that contributed.
That one stings.
I'm going to go against that one a little bit here. But I've got him as my wide receiver 8. Dave, you've got him a little higher as your wide receiver 6. So he comes out to be our wide receiver 6 in this, just based on where he ended up averaging consensus-wise. And with Royal, he's a yards after catch machine. He was one of the best in this class. He's just a sturdy, strong player through his release, through his routes, in the run after catch. He's breaking tackles, forcing missed tackles. And you don't see him as a very sudden change of pace guy in his routes, but he's a very smooth route runner, fluid release. And the thing that you're always going to hear me talk about with wide receivers is he's got that spatial awareness to find the soft spots in zone and to know where his man is in man coverage and how far away he is, where the feet are, where he's got to go to get himself open. So I see that a lot from him. He's not your typical yak gadget guy like a Malachi Corley from last season that everyone tries to say.
He can do that stuff.
He can. He can, but I think that he's not going to be relegated just to that role.
Right.
Like, I don't see a huge difference between Jalen Royals and Matthew Golden. And I know that's probably going to be crazy to a lot of people that have been looking at draft rankings, but I think you could easily make the case for him to be the wide receiver 6. He played outside a lot, might be best as a slot in the next level. And my comp for him was Jaden Reed. I think Jalen Royals is also a second round guy.
And that's who I see too, is like an undersized, hyper athletic guy. I mean, a lot of the things that we said about Matthew Golden, you can say about Jalen Royals. He's a bit undersized, but just so dynamic with the ball in his hands. And like you said, he can do everything. Like, when you watch him, he's not just getting manufactured touches and making plays after the catch. He's winning deep. He's making contested catches. He's beating man coverage. He's really doing it all. So, again, I'll put the same kind of asterisk next to Jalen Royals that I put against a lot of our running backs when we did the show last week. Draft capital is very important. And I think that a team is going to see the tangibles with Jalen Royals and take him with an early second round pick. We kind of talked about that late first, early second bubble. I think that's where Royals goes. Now, if I'm wrong and he falls to day 3, I'm going to note that in my rankings and I'll drop him down quite a bit. But I think that he has the skills. He's got the athleticism. I think a team's going to take a chance on him in at least round 2.
Yeah, I think that's probably where he ends up as well. Next guy we got on here, a wide receiver 7. Dave, I'm going to give you my absolute most frank candor that I can. This one sort of pissed me off because here
is this 7. The one that I skewed quite a bit? Trey Harris?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. I got as my wide receiver 12, which is he's been moving up slowly but surely. Dave, you've got him at wide receiver 4. You crafty SOB. Thanks for changing up the rankings here and skewing it. We're going to talk about this, but let me lay the groundwork here for Trey Harris. He's good. I think he's going to be one of the most.
Alfredo. Tell me why you hate Jalen, or why you hate Jaden Higgins, or Trey Harris.
You don't even know who he is. You don't love him like you do. You're a fake fan. Listen, I think Trey Harris is going to be one of the most hotly debated players in this class, and I think we're getting to that tier of players where you either love him or hate him. There's not a lot of in between with these guys, and I won't say that I hate Trey Harris, but what I don't like is that we have seen this player before. The guy who is very linear, wins on vertical balls, doesn't have a great route tree, doesn't have a great release package. He's got the size, but this guy doesn't really necessarily have the speed. We've seen players come out of Ole Miss that look like these great athletes.
He is not a DK Metcalf or an AJ Brown.
He's not.
I'm going to put that out there right now. He's not that type of athlete.
And I think a lot of people might mischaracterize him as that because he had so much success on deep balls. But you go and look at his limited route tree, it was mostly screens hitches and go balls.
Mhm.
61% of his targets, Dave, were inside of 10 yards. Like, this is a guy who did not actually do a lot of work deep, but when he did, he had success. And so I think there's a lot of potential here with Trey Harris because he's got some excellent body control. He's got some great play strength. And you can see that he does win deep. But so much of this production came against Furman, Middle Tennessee State,
Yep.
Wake Forest, Georgia
Eastern
Southern.
Kentucky, I think.
Yeah, and it's just
Yeah.
like you can't discount it too much because he did exactly what he's supposed to do against weaker competition, go and dominate. But there are so many of these little shortcomings where I think he's going to have to work a lot at route running, and he's going to have to fit into a very specific scheme in the NFL where I can't see him yet as a top 10 wide receiver or a guy that I think needs to go in the second round of the NFL draft. I think he's probably going to be a late round 3 pick, and I think it's going to be someone who has a very specific plan for him. But hey, if he shows up to the combine, runs a 4.4, I think there's going to be NFL GMs salivating over him.
And I think that's it. I mean, the combine's going to be huge for Trey Harris because I think there are some questions about his athleticism. There are a handful of times where he would have what looked like it was going to be a walk-in touchdown, and he'd get chased down. And a guy who's 6'3" and fluid and athletic, you want to see him be able to finish those runs, and he wasn't always able to do that in college. So I think the combine's going to be very, very important for him. Wouldn't surprise me if he tries to lose a couple pounds so he can shave, some time off of that 40.
Yeah.
But for me, again, it comes down to the ball skills. I mean, the way that he comes back and attacks the ball, like even when he's deep downfield, he's never letting the ball come to him. He's always working back to the ball, and he's always, just a very sure-handed guy who's going to fight through contact at contested catches. He's going to be able to manipulate his body downfield to make the catches as well. That's the stuff that gets me excited. And then, of course, I mean, you look at the raw metrics here. 5.12 yards per route run. Now I realize like he was the only receiver there and Jackson Dart loved him, but that is ludicrous. Like that was the NCAA lead in yards per route run by a landslide here. I'm a big fan. Obviously, I've got him as my wide receiver 4 in this class. I'm not bearing the lead here. There are some issues. I think when they asked him to do more refined routes, sometimes he looked a little bit clumsy. But for me, it's just the way that he works back to the ball. I think that's what quarterbacks are really going to like. And I think that as he builds his chemistry with the quarterback in the NFL, he's just going to be doing the same thing he did in college, just being that number one wide receiver, a guy who is just comfortable catching balls and, a quarterback's best friend. I think that he easily has a chance to be a wide receiver 1.
Okay. I don't want to waste too much time on this,
Yeah,
but I mean, this is
yeah,
one of the players that we disagree on the most,
quite a bit. Yeah.
and I'm gonna see it differently. I'm going to see it differently. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of the same things that I've seen with Treylon Burks, the same
Mhm.
things that I've seen with Quentin Johnston, the same
Yeah.
things that I've seen with oh man, I was ready for
Jonathan
another wide
Mingo.
receiver. Huh?
Jonathan Mingo.
Jonathan
Yep.
Mingo.
Yep.
I mean, there's just guys here. Keon Coleman is the one that really specifically comes to mind, and that's where I think that Trey Harris can succeed. Is if he has a system that's going to be patient with him, if he has a quarterback that can extend plays and sort of let him play some backyard football and come back to the ball, he's good at that. He's really good on those stop and goes. He's really good on the hitches because he comes back to the ball so successfully. And those are the kind of things where if he can win that way, cool. And they're going to have to be patient in getting him to open up and do more things in his route tree because that's where I just get most uncomfortable with him.
I think my only pushback to those comps, the guys that we kind of talked about here, were that a lot of those guys really struggled with contested catches, and Trey Harris didn't. I mean, Trey Harris came down with a lot more contested balls than I saw with those guys. I think he's got ball skills that some of those other guys you talk about, the Mingos and the Xavier Legats and those guys, I think he has much better abilities at high pointing the ball and getting through contact and making those contested catches than some of those other guys did. I mean, that was the big knock on Keon Coleman was that he wasn't great at contested catches. I think Harris is a little bit better there.
Well, hold on. I'm looking up. So Trey Harris, 61.5 contested catch rate. It's that puts him, I mean,
About
for
50th percentile.
yeah, it's average. It's average. And
Average.
for a guy that's 6'3", 210, I want him to be better at it. It doesn't mean he can't improve, right? Like these players can get better at contested catches. I want to see him use his, because he uses his strength well on routes. He doesn't always use it well on contested catches. That's what I want to see him do a little bit different.
Looking at
All
the
right.
contested catch data, Jackson Meeks is maybe a guy we should look into a little bit more. We like our contested catches, and Jackson Meeks led the NCAA in them out of Syracuse last year. Not going to be on today's show, but
Yeah, I'm about to say,
maybe
huh?
another one.
Huh? All right. Next guy on here. Same tier. Next player. Wide receiver 8, Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. And Dave, keeping it really simple, plays like a basketball player. He's got I called him like a Costco Drake London. Um, he does a lot of the same things. Like, dude even kind of looks like Drake London a little bit.
A little bit.
He got better every single year at Iowa State. He's a big player, 6'3", 217. He's got a wingspan over 6'7". He looks and moves like a basketball player, and that works when you're looking for a guy that needs fluid route running. Uh, Listen, I think that his value is going to see an increase, just like Trey Harris probably, because this is a class with a lot of smaller wide receivers and a lot of guys that are going to be good slot receivers. And this is a guy that can play on the outside. Now, he doesn't have the speed to win vertically, and he's not great with the change of direction stuff, but I think he's going to be one of those smooth, reliable wide receivers that he's going to get a chance from a team who's probably going to try to draft him round 2, late round 2, early round 3. I think it's probably more likely round 3.
Yeah, and it's funny you call him a basketball player because my notes on Trey Harris and Jay Higgins is that they both play like basketball players, especially when the ball is coming to them. You see them, they have this ability to almost box out cornerbacks. Like they look like centers on a basketball court. Like there's just nobody else getting to the ball because they have these huge frames where they're just able to block out defenders and make for a nice big target for quarterbacks. I like him a lot. The only other thing I'd point out about Jaden Higgins that I don't know if you mentioned, 25 touchdowns over the last 3 years is pretty
Yeah,
crazy. I
that's
mean, this guy
nuts.
was just a touchdown machine. So yeah, I mean, I always get enamored by the big guys with ball skills. And Trey Harris and Jaden Higgins, I'm going to be a little bit higher than consensus on them because they both have those. So I'm a big fan of Trey Higgins. Trey
Trey
Higgins.
Higgins, there we go.
Trey, there it is. Yeah, but Jaden Higgins, another guy that I think combine testing is going to be pretty important for because he doesn't have that athleticism that pops off the tape like a lot of the other guys that we talk about as first round talents. He can put those concerns to rest at the combine, or he could have a bad combine performance and fall to day 3.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm going to I have Jaden Higgins 3 spots ahead of Trey Harris in my rankings. And I think that's where I'll keep him. Looks like you have them. Jaden Higgins at 8 and Trey Harris at 4.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'll say, I mean, I do a big sweep after the draft, like I talk about all the time. Draft capital is very important. But there are some guys that are going to be, moved quite a bit after the combine. And Jaden Higgins and Trey Harris are 2 guys that I'm very high on right now compared to consensus. And if they don't do well at the combine, I will be knocking them down a bit.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to the next guy on here. Isaiah Bond is our wide receiver 9. And sorry, I'm sure you can hear my dogs going crazy outside. They're really into this Isaiah Bond ranking here. I've got Isaiah Bond as my wide receiver 6, Dave, and then you hate him. You have him as your wide receiver 12. So this is our Trey Harris and Isaiah Bond, the 2 of them going up again. I'm smelling a bet somewhere in there. But listen, I really liked what I saw with Isaiah Bond because I think that what's there is a little bit more moldable into someone who can be a productive receiver in the NFL and good for fantasy football. He led Alabama in receiving in 2023. And I'm sorry, just like if you can go to Alabama and lead them in receiving, you're probably a pretty good player. And then you take the transfer, you go to Texas. He starts off the year actually playing fantastic. He was leading the team in receiving through the first 5 weeks, gets injured in the Red River Shootout, the game Texas versus Oklahoma. He was on pace for a big 1,000-yard season and 8 touchdowns. 18.2 yards per catch, like ridiculous. Would have had a phenomenal year, and we'd be talking about him as a first-round guy for sure. And then the ankle injury just kept lingering. He injures. I have to look this up. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't know if he re-injured that same ankle or had a new ankle injury, but the injury started to plague him over the season, so that is going to have to be a ding against him. But this is a guy who I think a lot of people saw the embarrassing drop in the national championship game, and that's not indicative of his full career. He's had just 4 drops on 130 targets over the last 2 seasons. He's a guy he's got the speed. He's got the route running ability. He needs a little bit more refinement. And then the play strength, obviously being at 180 pounds, that's what's going to worry some people. I saw a lot of Jalen Waddle in his game. I'm not saying that that's what he's going to be or that he should get drafted as high, but there's a lot
injury
of that
concerns are there.
Yeah, and so like there's some of that stuff kind of
Yeah.
it mirrors Jalen Waddle. So I do see a little bit of that.
I'm kind of laughing right now because the Texas, they had a really nice 1-2 punch with Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond this year. And when you did the write up in our rookie guide on Matthew Golden, you comped him to Brandon Cooks, and whoever did the write up on Isaiah Bond
Isaiah
also
Bond to
comped him to Brandon Cooks. I mean, they are very
Brandon.
similar players, and I think
Yeah.
Bond. He might be the best downfield threat in this class. I mean, he is so fast. He looks like he was shot out of a cannon. There was no like ramp up to his top speed. Like by his third stride, he is at full speed already, and I think that that is really exciting. I just think that he's a little bit undersized, and that shows sometimes. You know, being 5'10", 180. He's compact, but doesn't really have the height. And like I said about Matthew Golden, you know, he relies on separation instead of being able to fight through contact and get back to the ball. So good player. I absolutely see the ceiling case for him. Just get a little bit concerned about the size.
Don't be a sizist, Dave. It's not cool.
I mean, I shouldn't be because we've seen Devonta Smith and Tank Dell and Jaden Reed and some of these undersized guys over the last few years, you know, really performing well at the NFL level. But I still get a little bit scared off by guys that are under 6 foot.
It makes sense. Like the concern is valid. If Isaiah Bond though goes to the combine, runs a 4.3, and starts getting that early round 2 hype that I think he would get based on that combine performance,
Hmm.
I think it's going to become a very different conversation. Like we
Absolutely,
could
yeah.
we could see him do a very similar thing to Xavier Worthy from last year.
Hmm.
And Texas was so weird, man. Like they had Bond had the good early year, gets hurt, and then all of the production then just shifts over to Golden. It was kind of just whoever's in that wide receiver 1 spot, you're going to get the production.
Yep.
All right, let's go to the final wide receiver in tier 3, and it's Jack Besh out of TCU. And we talked about him a little bit as one of the Senior Bowl winners when Cecil Lammy came on the show a few weeks ago. And Besh, just to rehash, he's an LSU transfer. He's one of these strong physical wide receivers, sort of a power slot, and really, really surefire hands. Dropped just one pass on 96 targets. He's one of these guys. He can line up inside or outside. I think he's probably going to be lining up inside. He was really good in the middle of the field, intermediate passes. The thing I always like to talk about, spatial awareness, it's there. And then at the Senior Bowl, he was just beating corners one-on-one over and over and over. MVP of the game, which normally I don't put a lot of weight in. It typically goes to quarterback, like whatever quarterback just happens to throw for multiple touchdowns. Besh looks good throughout that game, looked good throughout that week. He's going to be a very quarterback friendly target due to his aggressive ball skills, and he's a good space finder. He's strong. I comped him in the rookie guide to Puka Nakua, and it scared me to do that, but I'm finding that a lot of people agree with it, Dave.
And I hate you for making that comp because when I watch Jack Besh now, all I see is Puka Nakua. I mean, it's such
Yeah,
a
man.
good comp. They are so similar. But I think the thing that jumps out to me more than anything with Jack Besh, you don't see a single wasted movement. Everything he does is so fluid and so intentional that like as he is working downfield, he's still throwing head fakes and little stutter steps out of the way, but there is not a wasted movement. He just eats up so much field as he is getting through his routes, always making plays after the catch. It seems like he never has to stop to work back to the ball, never needs to jump to catch the ball. He's just catching the ball in stride wherever it's placed. And it seems like his mind before he's even catching the ball is about how he's going to make a play after the catch. And that is very Puka Nakua-ish. And that's why when you see him, the way that they move on the field, size, play style, it's all very, very similar. Now, I think that the issue with a guy like Besh is that actually, I'm not even going to talk about the issues. Everybody else is going to talk about the issues. He's like the consensus wide receiver 18. I love this guy. I'm a big, big fan of him. I know you are too. Really excited to see where he lands.
Yeah, I listen. I see him as a guy that's probably going to be going around 2,
Yeah.
and I listen. He's so strong with what he does. LSU tried to convert him to a tight end.
Yeah.
Like
At
that's
6'2". That's
right.
crazy to make a 6'2" guy a tight end, but he is that strong. Yeah.
6'2", 215 pounds, and you try to convert him to tight end. And he's just like, nah, I'm going to go to TCU. I'm going to go play wide receiver, and I'm going to kill it over there. And that's exactly what he did. And so, listen, I think some team is going to get a steal. I think he is appropriately moving up the ranks after the Senior Bowl week. All right, Dave. Tier 4, wide receiver 11 here. This is going to be a fun one to say all offseason.
Oh my goodness.
Elic
I'm sorry. My
Iomanu.
dog just farted, and it is like one of the worst fart. I don't even know how I'm going to make it
Oh,
through the show. I
yeah.
think I need
Well,
to get her out of here. Your
Do
dog's
you need
barking
to
and
take a
mine's
minute?
farting. It's a rough day. Whew.
Do you need to take a minute there, pal?
No, I don't know what she ate today, but all right, let's get back to the show. Sorry to cut you off, but that is
It's
ripe.
that is not an indictment on Elic AO
Whew.
Manor at all.
No, not at
Please,
all.
no.
Sorry.
Dog farts totally separate. Sorry, I gotta get it back together here. All right, so Elic Iomanor, however
Mhm.
you want to pronounce it, out of Stanford. He is just one of these big-bodied guys that 6'2", 210. He is thickly built. Dave, I think I had texted you that I saw a player who reminded me a lot of Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah.
Reminds me a little bit of Michael Pittman, and I think I finished here with my comp being Michael Wilson from Stanford, who plays
Yeah.
for the Arizona Cardinals. And there was a lot of similarities here. He's a fluid route runner. He's another guy just like Trey Harris who comes back to the ball and he can flatten his routes when needed. He does have, I think, a little bit of a better route tree than Trey Harris does, and you can see that he's a little more savvy because he needs to be. He's not this athlete that I've seen a lot of people write him down as like this crazy good athlete, and he's going to be a track star. And I know he's been on the track team, but I didn't see it in his play style. I didn't see him as a guy that was just consistently beating people on routes, but he knows how to leverage defensive backs properly, and he can win at the top of the route stem. What I want to see from a guy like this, and another reason I don't particularly love him, is he's big but doesn't win enough on the contested catches. 42% success rate. The route tree it's up and down. It's up and down. It really is. But a lot of that you can just pinpoint that on being nerfed by the Stanford offense.
I'm kind of shocked that he ran track. Do you know what he ran by chance? My guess is that he was like a 400 guy,
The shot put.
maybe,
I have no
maybe,
idea.
maybe 200. I mean, he's definitely not a sprinter. I'll tell you that. Like, he's not a guy who's gonna. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but he seems like he's more of that middle distance 200 400 type guy, because you can see it
Yes.
takes him a while to get up to his full speed. Once he does, if he can get those 2 or 3 strides away from a defender in open space, nobody's catching him, but he isn't always afforded the ability to kind of get that ramp up. Was I right on that, Alfredo?
So
Is that what he ran?
so allegedly he's done various events. I'm seeing here the 100, 200, 400, but that allegedly the report is that in the national under 18. Hold on, let me read this. Iomanor ran a 10.7 second 100 meter
Wow,
and was ranked 8th nationally in
that's
the under
fast.
18 200 meters. Now that's high school. That's
Yeah.
under 18. That's at a very different weight. You put that guy at 210 pounds, it's a very different player. And we've seen this before too, where there are guys who can go and run a good 40 and it doesn't always translate to the field. And we've seen it vice versa. Guys who run a great 40 and it doesn't or whichever. I don't even know which one I was saying there, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, it takes him a while to build up to his top speed, which is what I'm saying. So I'd be shocked
Yeah.
if he goes out here and blows us away with his 40 time. If they were measuring 100-meter times or 100-yard times, then I think he'd be a little bit
Maybe.
better. But you don't always see that athleticism, which I think is the biggest knock on him. But just prototypical size for a wide receiver one, magnets for hands. I really like that. It seems like he's able to catch just about everything that comes his way. Catches away from his body a lot, which I like to see as well. I think the thing that kind of left me lacking was the after the catch abilities. And again, that comes with, not being a great athlete. Every once in a while, you'd see him rip off a play after the catch, but there are a lot of times where he'd catch the ball and I was waiting for the after the catch play and he would just get chased down and tackled. So I think that can limit his ceiling a little bit, but I think he's got the skills and the size that he can kind of step in and be an immediate contributor if he lands in the right spot.
Yeah, I mean, I still kind of stand by that Juju comp where
Yeah.
he can be one of those big slots that you're probably not going to get a lot after the catch, but he's going to be sure-handed. He'll catch over the middle, beat linebackers, beat safeties, but I don't think you're going to see him consistently do that on the outside. All right, let's go to our next wide receiver. Wide receiver 12, Xavier Restrepo out of the U, out of Miami.
We got another big chasm here, Alfredo. I've got
And
I got Restrepo ranked higher than the last 5 guys we've talked about.
Yeah, and listen, I actually really do love Xavier Restrepo. But I know his mom, by the way. She worked out in my gym. What's up,
Oh.
Ashley? Shout out. But Xavier Restrepo, I love the way he's built. I love the way he plays. He's got, first of all, us Latinos, man, like we're built like soup cans, okay? We're thick and sturdy, but short, all right? 5'10", 200 pounds.
He's built like a running back.
He is exactly the type of slot receiver that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick would have drafted every single year in the NFL draft. And in our football guys rookie guide, we've got him comped to Julian Edelman. I comped him to Danny Amendola. Just pick your slot wide receiver. That's who he is. I've seen Hunter Renfrow. I've seen Wes Welker. I've seen all the very similar slot receivers, Dave. But with Restrepo, the thing that stands out to me so much is that it's not just that he's probably the best route runner in the class and he has
Mhm.
the reliable hands, but he's actually a really strong runner after the catch. And I'm probably self-admittedly a little too low. I honestly think I like Restrepo better than Io Manor, who I would probably put ahead of him if I was going to set this up for version 2 of our rookie guide. And I'd probably move Restrepo a little bit closer to wide receiver 10 or 11 because I do love the after catch ability and his ability to get open. He's reliable. The thing that worries me is he's going to be a slot player only. 90% of his
Yep.
routes from the slot. He could get limited to being just a wide receiver 3 on a team. You've got to end up in a spot where a quarterback is going to be looking heavily towards the slot and he's going to have an ability to get a lot of targets. And we see that sometimes where Hunter Renfrow does have a good season, but we don't consistently
It's funny.
see these
Hunter
smaller
Renfro was
slot
one of my
players.
comps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just don't see it where these guys consistently year in and year out continue to get the targets. And that's the only thing that worries me is he might have one or two really phenomenal fantasy seasons, but I get worried of like, what could that be over the career? That's the only thing is I worry he could get limited by his role.
Yeah, that's fair, and I think you're always taking that chance when you get a guy who can almost only play out of the slot. My comp for him, and I'm surprised I haven't seen this comp anywhere else. I see a lot of Golden Tate. You talk about the
Okay.
after the catch abilities and just like the vicious tackle breaking and having that really stout build where he can run through defenders. It's not him after the catch winning with speed. Like he will run through a defender's face after catching the ball across the middle, and I think that is what people are going to like is just how vicious of a player he is. Now we talk about the after the catch stuff, we talk about the route running, but that release package, like it seems like he is one step off the line and he's already immediately open. I mean, it's just he is immediately that guy. And that's why Cam Ward loved him because he was just immediately open, before Cam Ward would even finish his drop back. There's Restrepo just with his hands out waiting for the ball. I think that's going to be valuable in the NFL. And of course, he did talk about the potential shortcomings is that he will be limited to slot usage, but there's a lot of other really good fantasy wide receivers out there who are limited to slot usage. So I see the ceiling for a guy like Restrepo being a target hog who can make contested catches and make plays after the catch. That sets him up for such a high ceiling in fantasy football if the stars align.
Well, the next guy that we've got in here at 13 is very similar to Restrepo, and he's another one of these thickly built, fast slot receivers.
Mhm.
Jalen Noel, or Noel, I believe it's been pronounced, wide receiver out of Iowa State. He's 5'11, 200 pounds. In the Football Guys rookie guide, he's the wide receiver 12. Dave, we've got him as our wide receiver 13. I've got him as wide receiver 10. I love the speed for Noel. I want to see him become a little bit more refined as a route runner. There's just certain things that he won't be able to beat, which is being, smaller, just having that small catch radius. It's a lot of the same things that I like about Restrepo and Isaiah Bond and a bunch of these smaller guys. I think he's fine in his route pacing. He accelerates and decelerates at the right times. I just, the footwork isn't always clean. And that's just something you see with fast guys. They just want to be fast all the time and their route running isn't always clean. But I mean, when I initially put on the tape, I actually liked him better than Jaden Higgins. And then the more I watched the tape, I said, okay, the shine has worn off a little bit of the speed standing out so much. There's things that I like better about Higgins. But Noel, you've
Spot
got
on.
him as your wide receiver 14, Dave. So thoughts on Noel?
I mean, exactly the same. When I started watching Iowa State, I was like, wow, Jalen Noel is great. And Jaden Higgins was the guy that kind of I wasn't as crazy about. And then as you start to watch it, you realize that teams are game planning to stop Jaden Higgins, which allowed for a lot of broken plays where Noel, do we have a consensus on
I've
this?
heard it both ways.
We're on a first name basis. My boy Jalen, he benefited from a lot of broken plays because teams were so hellbent on stopping Jaden Higgins. So happens in the NFL too. But it's not easy to beat NFL defenders the way that he was able to in college when he was drawing secondary coverage and they were oftentimes double teaming Jaden Higgins. So another guy that I do see some shades of Golden Tate in, a Jaden Reed type of player where he's just that dynamic after the catch guy. You'd probably need to fall in a system that is going to work to get the ball in his hands. San Francisco, Miami, Green Bay. The problem is a lot of those teams already have the guy that is in that role. So Jalen Noel might just be a luxury depth piece if those teams draft him. Maybe we see another team pull him in and kind of try to use him the same way some of those other teams have used similar players and found success. Really fun player. I just think that he's going to end up being a little bit scheme dependent.
So I think this next guy at 14, all three of these receivers kind of fall into the same bucket for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Tez Johnson out of Oregon. And it's another slot receiver. The difference here is that Tez is a little different. He's not this, a thicker, bigger receiver. He's very wiry. He's small, 5'10", 165 pounds. He's not going to kill you with his size and strength, but man, he's so good after the catch. He is a yards after catch speedster, excellent separation on every single route. He was absolutely crushing it at the Senior Bowl, showing off in the one-on-one drills, surprisingly smooth release off the line of scrimmage, which is what you want to see on a small or thin guy like this, is can they get off the line of scrimmage and get off of a defensive back and have that release. Just and we have him listed at 165. I think he weighed in even less recently at the Senior Bowl. I think it was more like 156, if I have that correct. But it's the crisp route running, this human joystick-esque stop-start ability. He's going to be a return man. I know the comp you gave was Kevontae Turpin, and it is very similar. I can absolutely see that. I just think that Tez is so much better as a wide receiver that I think there are going to be more teams willing to take a chance on him, because I do think that he is probably a round 3 guy based on however he times and how well he did it at the Senior Bowl. The comp we have for him here in the rookie guide is Greg Dortch. I think a lot of people are going to make the Tank Dell comp as well, but I think these are apt. I think
Dortch is a little bit thicker.
Comps.
If I isn't Dortch like 195? I could totally be wrong there.
Listen, man, I don't have players' thickness on record just sitting here at the whim of your questions. But yeah, sure. I think everyone is going to weigh more than Tez Johnson, and that's right. The part that's going to suck.
175. So he's got an extra 10 pounds on him. Nothing huge.
But that's the part that's going to suck with Tez Johnson, is that when you draft him, you're hoping for a guy that's going to be an incredible outlier. Now, we keep seeing outliers year after year after year. It's just, is he going to be the next one?
Yeah. And I think the Tank Dell comp, a lot of people make, and I do like that, but the concern with Tank Dell was his size. And when he's been healthy and on the field, he's been objectively very good, but he's been in the league for 2 years and he suffered 2 season-ending injuries. I mean, that size, when you are a full-time wide receiver and you're taking those hits as a wide receiver, it's tough to last a whole season. So that's kind of my fear with Tez Johnson, is that we know he's good. We know he's fast, but I think that his skill set is going to be best on special teams, where he's only getting a handful of touches every single game. He could be nice and fresh for those, and he could make the big explosive plays on special teams. I could be wrong. I mean, some team might draft him and say, hey, we want to, use this guy creatively and get the ball in his hands. But I think my fear is that his size just really, really sets him up to not work his way into a wide receiver rotation.
Yeah, that's going to be the tough thing. It's going to have to be a team that's kind of already set on the outside. They almost take Tez as their luxury slot player, that they just want him to get open and do some fun things in the screen game and stuff like that. And I don't know that I see too many of those teams available to do that at the moment, especially with an early pick. So if you do draft him early, like on round 3, day 2, it's because you have the faith that he's just going to be getting open for you all the time.
Right.
All right. Last guy in this tier, and this one was sort of a late riser for me in the rankings. I know you've got him at wide receiver 13. I've got him at wide receiver 17. It's Torrey Horton, wide receiver out of Colorado State. And I think he's going to be one of these guys that is a little underrated throughout the process, because you don't see the big numbers, at least this past year. But what you do see is a long career, ups and downs. Colorado State, man, the passing game just struggled. But Torrey Horton, what I did see is a smooth route runner, a guy who, he kind of always looked like he was jogging, Dave, but he was still beating the defenders that were there.
He just effortless movement. Like he just is he's just a glider. Like he just eats up space so easily.
It's very fluid. It's very it looks effortless, like you said. He's got the big frame though, 6'3", strong, reliable hands. I will say this: limited route tree with what they were doing in Colorado State, and that's the tough thing is a lot of these wide receivers don't get to develop the way they want because they're limited to what quarterback they have. And so it's a lot of crossers going on at Colorado State. Get underneath, take what the defense gives you. With Horton, he's got the ability to play outside or inside. I think he's probably a day 3 guy, if I'm being honest. But
I
I
think the
think that
age especially is going to push him to day 3. Yeah. I think
yeah,
he's
but
what,
I think
25 years old already?
he could be 35. I have no idea. But the potential is there, is what I'm getting at with Horton. And I think that's what you start to get into when you get into these lower tiers. It's what's the potential? Can you rely on this guy to catch passes consistently? Can they beat defenders consistently? Do they have the size? Do they have the speed? Horton's got that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, and I think the one thing maybe you mentioned it while I was looking up his age, couldn't find it for whatever reason, so sorry about that. I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but his catch radius is what blows me away. I mean, there are times where, like you said, the Colorado State offense was not good. Their passing game, there was a lot to be desired there, and there were a lot of errant throws that you would see go in Horton's direction and just assume that he wasn't going to come down with them. And he was making catches that nobody had any business making, just terribly errant throws that he was coming down with. He's really good at using his hands. He's never waiting for the ball to come to him. He goes out there and just snaps at the ball, works back towards it. If a ball is near him, he's going to come down with it. And it's kind of funny, Alfredo. We when we start doing our rankings and our rookie analysis, we don't really talk all that much about it at the time. We are very independent in our process, and I publish my rankings and you publish your rankings. And I was happy to see that we were both very high on Torrey Horton. I thought I was going to be one of the few guys that was kind of holding the torch for Horton, and then I saw that you were right there with me. So I think we both see a lot of the same things. There are obviously some flaws in his game, but he's a guy who is NFL ready. I mean, he can get drafted and play today. He is ready to go.
So he's not crazy old. 22 years old.
Oh, I don't know why I thought he was 25.
Well, because
Yeah,
you got the 5 years of college, but you
that
don't
was it.
enter
Yeah.
college at 20. So some
Yeah.
people do. I don't know. No
Yeah.
knock on you
Yeah.
if you went to college at 20. Well, good for you.
Better late than never.
Yeah, go get that degree, girl.
Next year.
Yeah, next tier. So this is the final tier, and what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna list all of the players that are in this tier, and we're gonna pick one that we want to talk about, Dave. So at 16, we've got Nick Nash. It's just
Dibs.
fun to say. Oh, also dibs. So we're
All right.
both going to talk about Nick Nash here out of San Jose State. 17, Ricky White III out of UNLV. At 18, Ty Felton out of Maryland. 19, Savion Williams out of TCU. And at 20, Kyle Williams out of Washington State. And listen, I'll say this. Originally, I was going to talk about Kyle Williams because I actually really like him and I've got him ranked in my top 15. And a lot of it is just simply he's a dude. He's a dude. And it's thank God we're late into the podcast when I make this joke, but there was one time like someone, I don't know, Supreme Court or something like that, where he was asked about like, could you define pornography? And he says like, I can't define it, but you know it when you see it. And it's when you watch a wide receiver, you know it when you
Oh,
see it.
sorry. I thought you were saying like Kyle Williams was in the Supreme Court getting asked about pornography. I was like, I missed this on my. All right. Okay. Totally separate situation. I was like, why was Kyle Williams in the Supreme Court? And then you threw that in, and I was just like, what am I missing here? All
No,
right. Yes. I know
no,
what you're saying. Yes. I think it was a
it's just like,
senator that said that. Yes. Not Kyle Williams.
yes, yes. It's just that when you watch the guy, you know that he is a good
Yeah.
wide receiver. You see it on him. I don't want to get too deep
Swagger,
into that
man.
one, but
Swagger off
Nick
the charts.
Nash. What was that, Dave?
Said swagger off the charts for Kyle Williams.
Yeah,
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 like
yeah,
he might be a day 3 guy, but he plays like a first rounder.
yeah. It's the last guy on
Nick
here,
Nash.
Nick Nash, that we want to talk about. He, Triple Crown winner in the FBS, led college football in receptions, yards, and touchdowns in 2024. He's a former quarterback, and I love the receivers that do this because they just have such a good understanding of where to be on the field. And he played as a big slot at San Jose State, finds a lot of open space with ease. He excels over the middle of the field, big catch radius for a guy that's 6'2", hands catcher, good body control, uses his frame to high point passes. There's just, you see him dominate over the lower level competition. Now, what I wish I would have seen is a guy that got more refined as a route runner. He just doesn't have that experience yet. So he didn't win a lot of his one-on-ones at the Shrine Bowl, which I would have loved to see. And that might ding his NFL draft stock here. But I comped him to Jalen Coker, and another guy that I think is Jacoby Myers. I think that as time goes on, if he becomes a better route runner, Jacoby Myers was also a former quarterback. Like, this is a guy that I think
Yep.
he probably goes day 3, around 4 or 5, but I just don't think you end up leading the FBS in receptions, yards, and touchdowns all on a whim, all by luck that San Jose State has a certain passing offense. You have to have some sort of talent there. And when I watch the film, that backed that up.
Yeah, he's 6'3", but he plays like he's 6'8". I don't understand how he's able to like stretch his body the way he does. You see these balls that look like they're going to get sailed into the bleachers, and somehow he just comes down with them and scores a touchdown. I mean, he's got insane hops for his size. Really, really fun player. You already talked about the former QB thing. And I think that's, he's only been playing wide receiver for like 3 years. All right. So, like, some of the nuance to his game might not be there. You talk about his inability to beat man coverage, but I can think of some other guys that came into the NFL unable to beat man coverage that were just kind of these zone beaters that developed over time. Amon St. Brown, Cooper Kupp. Now, obviously, that's the high end range of outcomes. I'm not saying that every guy who can't beat man coverage is going to develop that skill in the NFL, but we have to remember that Nick Nash is still very, green when it comes to playing wide receiver. And I could see that sort of trajectory where he gets, I mean, I think the Rams would be a great fit for him, where he can kind of be that guy who just eats up zone coverage for his first couple of years as he develops other skills. I think the ceiling there with Nash is really high. Of course, he actually is 25. I don't need to look this one up. I know for a fact Nick Nash is 25. So he is old by rookie standards, but a guy who could easily be an immediate contributor. The other guy I want to mention in this tier real quickly, and we don't have to dive deep into it. Savion Williams is a really intriguing guy. Just the size and
He's Laviska
athleticism.
Shenault to me.
He is. I mean, I'm not saying that like you need to go out and reach for this guy in your rookie draft, but I don't know if there's a guy in this draft that has that same size athleticism combo. I mean, this guy, 6'5", just an absolute freak with what he can do. His speed, his tackle breaking abilities. They were so creative with using him at TCU. He was a high school quarterback, and they used him regularly as a wildcat quarterback, but he also played out of the slot, played out wide, took a ton of snaps out of the backfield. He is probably the most scheme dependent player in this class. He is not a guy who is going to thrive on any team, but I could see a lot of teams drafting him day 3 where he's probably going to fall to and having plans to use him. Again, not a guy that I'm saying like you need to draft in your rookie drafts by any means, but I think I'm going to be throwing a lot of 4th, 5th round darts on Savion Williams just to kind of see what happens there.
He's going to be one of those guys that GMs and dynasty managers and just NFL draft fans, you're either going to love or hate. You're either into that or you're not. That wide receiver that has the intriguing skill set every single year that you're like, oh man, if he just lands on the right team, he could be really good. Savion's one of those guys. Like, I've seen him as some people's inside their top 10 wide receivers, Dave. We've got him outside of our top 15. We're close to almost wide receiver 20 at this point.
Yeah. And again, I'm not clamoring for him by any means saying that he's going to be a great player. He's my wide receiver 19. Intriguing if things do work out and he lands in the right situation, but could absolutely be a nothing burger too. I mean, when you're getting outplayed by Jack Besh for an entire season, not just outplayed, but like handily outplayed, like Jack Besh had like 3 times as many receiving yards as him, I'm not going to ignore that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what you start to see as you get lower and lower down the ranks, is you're going to find a lot of warts on these players. But I think we did a good job. We covered, let's say, about 18 different wide receivers through this. We listed 20 on here for you guys. It was a beefy episode, like we promised. I think we delivered on that promise. And we're going to be back again next week talking about the quarterbacks and tight ends as we keep leading up to the NFL draft. We're going to be talking more about NFL free agency, and we're going to be ranking players and teams and landing spots and all kinds of stuff. And we're going to be doing so much throughout this offseason. So make sure, if you haven't already, that you've subscribed to not only the podcast on Apple and Spotify, but to the YouTube channel, where you can always see our beautiful faces here and just join us each week for the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. And as always, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.